All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick as always. Hello, Drew. Today we're going to talk about Bengals-Steelers, talk about Colts-Falcons, and Lions-Vikings, some games with playoff, divisional, award, futures, repercussions, somewhat compelling in their own right as well. Let's start with Bengals-Steelers. Bengals 2-point favorites over the Steelers in Pittsburgh. The total is 37. Looks like it's going to be Mason Rudolph, though Kenny Pickett did practice today, albeit as the fourth quarterback. So I suspect that he's not going to go, but maybe back the week after. How much do you believe in Jake Browning as a road favorite without Jamar Chase?
Boy, I am prepared to go to war with Browning, I think, again. But it has more to do with just not believing that the Steelers have any identity right now on offense or defense that they can hang their hat on. Mason Rudolph is a guy that I have a fairly low rating on. And when you kind of dissect what happened in that Colts game, the stuff with George Pickens, the comments he's made today in response to the criticism he got for his quality of play, all of it swirls that things are a little bit out of control in Pittsburgh right now. Mike Tomlin obviously struggling to get to win number 9 to keep his illustrious never having a losing season record alive. I don't think that's going to happen. Interesting market on this one because it did tickle 3 before coming back down. And you can look at that in a couple of ways. One being like, well, somebody really likes Mason Rudolph better than Mason Trubisky. And okay. The fact that Trubisky got benched, we talked about this, was more of a sign of, yeah, you didn't downgrade enough, as opposed to there being any kind of upside potential here for Mason Rudolph. This offense is broken. The offensive line is performing poorly. The rushing attack right now is toothless outside of a couple of bright spots from Warren. I don't know how Pittsburgh stays in this game, gets in this game really, other than being at home. I would kind of note that Cincinnati's defense is probably the one weak spot in this contest, but that doesn't really agree with what the market is doing, moving this down to 36.5 for a total, Jay. So basically somebody is saying, yeah, no, the Pittsburgh defense is going to reel in Jake Browning, just like they did the first time they played. And while in the first contest, it's notable T. Higgins wasn't available and now Jamar Chase won't be available. A lot of what Browning has done hasn't really come at the benefit of Jamar Chase making outstanding plays. I mean, granted, T. Higgins' touchdown against the Vikings was probably touchdown of the season. It was in the conversation. That was absolutely unbelievable. The getting his toes in bounds and then whipping the ball across to break the plane of the goal line was quite cool. And if Higgins is available, Boyd is available, and obviously Chase Brown, who now all of a sudden matters a ton for this Bengals team, is available, then I can't see why Browning can't continue his success. Of the kind of replacement quarterbacks that we've seen this year, he is the one that is the most consistently, kind of bringing it week in, week out. And so expecting all of a sudden that's going to dry up because you're up against the Steelers team that is kind of falling apart in front of our eyes is perfectly fine by me. I'm not expecting Cam Hayward to go. I don't think you're getting anywhere close to, all pro production out of Minkah Fitzpatrick anymore. They are all of a sudden now are clear and obvious ways to attack the secondary. I mean, basically everything about what you're seeing from the Pittsburgh looks pretty smoke and mirrors to me. So I can see the Bengals continuing to have success. Now, market isn't really going to give you much better of a price, I don't think, than 1.5. This isn't getting to pick. Pickett's not going to come and save the day and really shake up this number at this point. So we're kind of in a dead zone between 2.5 and 1.5. And at this point, I would probably sell out to 2.5 if I was going to play the Bengals. But I don't know. I don't think I'm that off base in kind of having Browning as clearly a league average rating in terms of quarterback play right now. And I think there's upside to that with a healthy offensive line in front of him and Chase Brown contributing. So, yeah, small buy for me on Bengals.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the interesting thing about Browning against the Vikings was that his average depth of target was 9 yards, which, he was sitting under 5.6, that type of range coming into that game. So he showed that, he could add another dimension after the Vikings and Flores took away the screen game that had just eviscerated the Colts. And he wasn't just purely yak dependent, which is good. At the same time, I wonder how much not so much that Chase was his main target or anything. It's just the gravity that Chase has on the field. And Gus
That's
Bradley
fair.
talked about this with the Colts, where he talked about how the Colts, they sold out and played deep to just stop Jamar Chase because they didn't want their, rookie 7th round and undrafted corners on an island against Jamar Chase. And so that led to all the screens and Chase Brown going 54 yards for a touchdown on a screen pass. So I think that will hurt. A little concerned about how bad Jake Browning looked against the Steelers the first time around, which was just so out of touch with everything he's done since. Now, to be fair, that was his first proper start, and it would make sense that he would get better after that. And what he was able to do against the Vikings, who have, by any measure, a very good defense, that is compelling. I do think that Cincinnati's defense is there's just nothing there, particularly as a run defense. DJ Reader going down is brutal. They couldn't do anything against Ty Chandler all game. So I think the Steelers, they should be able to run the ball, but I would also ultimately just lean Bengals because I think that Mason Browning is the type of quarterback who just submarines everything. And from a live betting angle, this ties into what we spoke about the other day, where if you see the first two, the market is projecting a certain level of, no one thinks that Mason Rudolph's going to be good, but a certain level of functional competence. And there's a chance we see after the first two series that, he's the second coming of Easton Stick, which is, I think, very much in play. Then I think Cincinnati alt lines. It's the type of thing, too, where if game script gets out of hand for the Steelers and they're having to throw and they can't take advantage of Cincinnati's run defense, that I think this game would be more prone to a 10-point lead turning into a 21-point lead than your average game with this line and total. So I think that would be the way that I would attack it. Live betting. I would also probably bet the under on Mason Rudolph in case he's so poor that he has to have a fair bit of equity of just getting benched. But I don't think there's anything here for the Steelers. And also the other issue is just their safeties. They don't have any safeties left.
Yeah.
KZ is suspended for the season. Minka Fitzpatrick has already been ruled out. They have other safeties who are not practicing. Isaac Seumalo has been banged up. He didn't practice today. So it seems to be all trending in the wrong direction. Last one for you on the Bengals. I make it 12-1 that they run the slate from here, and a lot of that is needing to beat Kansas City and Arrowhead next week. You think if they did that without Joe Burrow, without Jamar Chase, they get to 11-6, miraculously make the playoffs, that Zach Taylor would get any buzz for Coach of the Year after he, I think, somewhat outcoached Kevin O'Connell on Saturday?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. He's in tier 3 right now. We have a clear sort of 3 tiers, I think, and each tier has 3 coaches. There's tier 1, which is your feel good stories, your exceed expectations, your snap the franchise's miserable history, which is the Dan Campbell, Shane Steichen, DeMeco Ryans tier. And those 3 teams, those 3 coaches, all very, very, very live to stub their toes from here to the finish line. And if they all lose this week, then we enter chaos mode, where there are probably 6 guys who are available to, potentially come in and steal. I would put McDaniel, Shanahan, and Stefanski in tier 2, just because I think that what they have done is been recognized enough by some people who have, who have influence that they would get put into the conversation. And then on tier 3, I would put McVay, Zach Taylor, and pick one more candidate who you think could just have enough impressive wins down the stretch to be considered like John Harbaugh, I guess. Now Zach Taylor moves up a huge notch if they finish 11-6, and they're the top wild card seed in the AFC, surely. But he's not going to be able to flip the Ravens for the division, and I don't think he's realistically going to be able to take enough votes away from the rest of the guys in that mix. But I think the kind of broader point is there's like 8 or 9 guys who are still alive for Coach of the Year. This is a very crowded market, and to say that at week 15 is pretty wild.
Yep, I agree. I think Taylor ultimately, and it's similar, I think he's got kind of a stronger version of it's the same thing with McVay, is that when you max out at 10-7, like McVay maxes out at 10-7, I just don't see any world where that would actually win the award, particularly because their opponents the rest of the way are pretty soft, and the Niners probably won't have anything to play for in Week 18, so they'll be playing backups at that point. And then with Taylor, just feels like Taylor going 11-6 when he had Joe Burrow for half the season, and going 6-0 with Jake Browning. I'm not sure how that beats the AFC South guys, how that beats Stefanski, and let alone the coaches who are going to have more wins like Shanahan, McDaniel, and Dan Campbell. But yeah, I largely agree with your tiering. I'd have Shanahan a little bit higher, and probably Dan Campbell a little bit lower. I think Campbell needs to sweep these next two games to have any chance. And if he does that, he's a very good chance, but I don't think he's a lock even then. I think this award will be the battleground for this award, I think, is Week 18 in Indianapolis, when Steichen and Ryans play each other, and someone has to win that game, and it likely bolts them into the playoffs. And if it doesn't, if they're done by then that creates chaos. But before we talk about those Colts, Drew, unwrap an early Christmas present this Saturday with an NFL doubleheader. It all begins at 3 p.m. Eastern as we take you up to kickoff in Pittsburgh between those Bengals and Steelers on NBC and Peacock. Then 7:30, it's a Peacock exclusive matchup as Josh Allen and the Bills look to the postseason mix when they travel to Los Angeles to face Easton Stick, the Stick Man, and the Chargers, and what looms as a blockbuster game that the Bills will win by 80 points. All right, Colts-Falcons. This line is flipped from Colts -2, -2.5 to Falcons -1 on the news that Taylor Heineke will be going instead of Desmond Ridder. Now, this is about as inconsequential as a 3-point swing that you can have, going from 2 to 1, passing through 0. But do you think that Taylor Heineke warrants this kind of swing anyway?
No, I think this feels like early Christmas, Jay. I wouldn't have gone to war, I don't think, with the Colts at 2.5, but if you're going to give me plus money, I'm in. The Colts are a better coach, more well-coached team. Arthur Smith is floundering right now. He does not have the answers. I think the Colts are getting, they're definitely getting a little bit of paying the price, I guess, for some portions of the season where their defense was grading very poorly because of injuries. And, they're closer to full strength right now. And in particular, that pass defense, which we've talked about, I know, a number of weeks, they're going to come up with some takeaways here. I would expect that Taylor Heineke is going to be a little bit pressing here in terms of trying to do enough to warrant the consideration he got to becoming the starting quarterback. And there's no material upgrade in my numbers from Ridder to Heineke. And I think, the fact that this is a defense on the other side of the ball for Atlanta that can be had, particularly with a full strength rushing attack with Jonathan Taylor returning, this looks like a problem. There's no real likelihood that they're going to generate a pass rush on Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew should have all time to operate here, and expecting to have Pittman back. He's got, he's doing some nice-ish things. He's being a lot less of a walking turnover lately. Now he could turn into a pumpkin on the road, but I feel like in a in a domed environment against a defense that's missing key players at every level, I'm not exactly worried about that. So the age and the injuries situation for the Falcons defense, I think, could ultimately be their undoing here. And the Taylor Heineke support in the market is pretty weird to me. I don't agree with it. And I don't think that realistically it's going to help Arthur Smith save this thing. Falcons can finish 6-11. And I think that would probably be that would be the sign for a regime change there. And just considering how little he's gotten out of so much high-end talent in the offensive side of the ball, I think it would be warranted.
Yep, I agree. And so since week 7, Gardner Minshew, by EPA per play, number 14 quarterback in the NFL, sandwiched right between Geno Smith and Jared Goff, and better than Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr. Now, admittedly, that is against a fairly soft schedule, but the fact that he even has games in him like he did against the Steelers, I think bodes well against an Atlanta pass defense that is not particularly good. They're just injured on both sides of the ball at the moment, the Falcons. They just don't have any strength. They're not good at anything, which is a problem. And the Colts, with their defense, this defense is now up to 13th in EPA per play, 15th by PFF grade. Again, soft schedule that they've played particularly recently, but still, I mean, this team the defensive line is just really good. Like Ebukam, Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart. That's a really good front four. Grover Stewart being back means they can defend the run, which they weren't able to when he was out for 6 weeks with suspension. My man Juju Brent's coming back helps because now he's not great, but at least he's better than what they were putting out there, and it allows Kenny Moore to play more in the slot if they need. So I think the defense is just solid. It's not great, but it's solid. And then they're getting healthier on offense with Taylor back. Braden Smith is a chance to return, which I think will be key because Blake Freeland isn't very good filling in at right tackle. And Michael Pittman, who's in the concussion protocol, everything so far has been relatively positive about him. And to your point, Colts are just a better coach team. They're going to eke out, I think, the little slithers of win probability with Steichen's aggressiveness. Disappointed that Steichen kicked the field goal on, I think, 4th and 1 to put them up 14 instead of going for the dagger. But I guess when Mitch Trubisky is on the other side, you can afford to be a little bit more conservative with your decision making. But I agree. I like the Colts. If they win this game, then I think Steichen is a win away from Coach of the Year by beating Houston in Week 18. I'm not sure the interceding game against the Raiders really matters. And so I think that if you like the Colts in this game, if you like the Colts generally against this soft schedule to close, I think you're better off just betting Steichen, who's still plus 350 to win Coach of the Year. I make the Colts plus 285 fair to win the division. Steichen wins the division. I think that's pretty close to auto win for Coach of the Year. And there are still paths for him to win without it. So that would be my best betting Coach of the Year at the moment.
Yeah, I dig all that. I like Colts this week, which means I like Colts. I mean, really just like I like Field against the Jags in the AFC South. And I think that Week 18 game is going to matter. I don't love Gardner Minshew up against CJ Stroud if that's the way that breaks, but CJ Stroud is probably going to be without his full complement of passing weapons in the passing game, which could be the difference because Texans certainly aren't doing anything on the ground in that game. One last kind of key point to make about the Colts, and I agree with Steichen, is extremely low. He would be my number 2 pick right now if we were voting for Coach of the Year after Shanahan. After Shanahan. But again, like that's my preference. It's not what I think the voters are going to do at all. They don't ever look at who is the best. They always look at it through the lens of, who is the biggest surprise. And 14-3 is not going to get Shanahan, I don't think, unless everybody else trips. But the thing I wanted to point out about the defense, number one, Gus Bradley is actually quietly had a pretty decent season coordinating. Like he used to be a guy you could really pick on pretty obviously for some of his scheme decisions, and that's just not really the case anymore. He's had a couple of gaffes in terms of game plan, but nothing that I was really disappointed in him. And honestly, the current state of the NFL, like your weak and your middle linebackering core, like matters a lot all of a sudden. Like if those guys get hurt, your defense just completely craters apparently. Like this has now happened to like 4 or 5 different units this season. And if your guys step up and are outstanding, then all of a sudden, bang, you're like a top half defense. And that's what's happening right now with Zaire Franklin. This guy's playing out of his mind. Well, he's just seeing the field well. He's playing with speed. He's healthy as can be. So as long as Zaire Franklin's out there, I think you're going to be able to counter any type of rush attack. EJ Speed's playing well also, and you're right, that front four is now healthy, so you should be able to get a pass rush here. I don't know what's stopping the Colts from getting a win, and I'm feeling pretty lucky that somebody gave us the opportunity to bet them at plus money on Moneyline.
Yeah, I don't understand it. Nate Tice on the Athletic Football Podcast, he made a really good point about the Colts and kind of contrasted it to the Falcons, where the Falcons, they just don't have any kind of concepts that they're trying to get to on offense. They don't have a plan. Meanwhile, the Colts, they just spam RPOs. Like they have like 5 plays, but they're really good at it and they're really comfortable at it and they know exactly what they want to do. And they do it, and bad defenses, which they largely play, can't stop it. And so I think that certainly the advantage leans Colts. I have a lot of leftover Colts merch, Drew, from the failed 2021 Jonathan Taylor Offensive Player of the Year expedition. So I was very happy to crack out my numerous. I have Colts pajamas. I have 2 Colts hats. I have a JT jersey. So it's been very good dusting them off and watching Shane Steichen, who is it's strange because on paper it's such an uninspiring team, but just the way they play is so fun. Just with what they do on offense, with the creative play design, with like the 4th down play against the Bucs to Mo Alley Cox, and Minshew's so chaotic. He's not, he's not Mason Rudolph by any stretch. He is not great because of turnovers, not because he can't, make the throws and make the plays. So I think if I had a ballot, I would probably be Steichen 1, Shanahan 2, and Stefanski 3, maybe with all the injuries they've dealt with.
I dig that.
Yeah, I think that would be my top 3. I don't think voters will necessarily see that. I think they'll give a bit more weighting to Ryans and Campbell, who I wouldn't have in my top 5, I don't think. But I do think Steichen will. I think he will resonate in particular.
Art Smith, by the way, not in the running for coach.
No, not the preseason favorite, or at least one of the 2 or 3.
He was a darling, preseason darling. Yeah. Somebody shared a data set with me today that absolutely melted my mind. When you were asked the question, well, why is Tyler Algier getting so much of the running share here? Like, what's happening? Right? It's actually a binary. When they're facing stacked boxes, it's Algier, and when they're facing light boxes, it's Bijan. So you can literally stack the box on these guys, force them to play their worst player, and you succeed if you have a defense that has the ability to kind of get it done with safeties and linebackers. So it's weird that now the book is out on that, and I don't know what he does to break tendencies, but the splits were like, oh my God, this is as obvious as can be. I would assume that every NFL defensive coordinator he faces knows this too.
Yeah, no, that is bizarre. And the idea as well that Taylor Heineke is the answer. I mean, Taylor Heineke's terrible. He's not good at all. He had last year as almost a full-time starter. He had a sub 50 PFF grade. He's one of the 5 worst quarterbacks in the NFL. So I guess maybe he's different to Ritter, but I don't think he's a market upgrade. It has to be slight. I certainly don't understand this move from 2.5 flipping to 1 the other way. All right. Before we get to Lions-Vikings, find another way to celebrate the holiday season, Drew, by being part of Premier League festive fixtures beginning on Thursday, December 21st. We'll have 29 matches over 13 days on NBC, USA, and Peacock. So check out all the thrilling moments, from creative set pieces to scorching shots and amazing saves. It is the gift that keeps on giving. Just across my timeline before we started recording, a little Turkish Super League action came across my feed, where Turkish Super League is a legitimate league. Fenerbahce, Galatasaray, they play in this league. They have multiple Champions League spots. And so this game against Trabzonspor and the opposing team, they had a controversial goal go against them where there should have been a foul in the lead up. So the team president comes down to the field and he's like, all right, we're out of here. Just tells the players to leave the field, off to the locker room, forfeits the game. Players are on their knees begging to be able to play because they're in a relegation struggle. Team president, no, not standing for this. I wonder if the same thought occurred to Sean Payton in the NFC title game against the Rams after his receiver was absolutely level. Probably not. Probably wouldn't have happened. Anyway, little Turkish soccer aside, but let's get back to the state of Minnesota. The Lions are 3-point favorites at the Vikings. The total is 47 flat. Do you think the Lions fix their defense, in particular against the Broncos? I think we always knew that the offense would get right, but do you think that they found something defensively against Denver, or did they just get a little lucky?
It's got lucky.
Yeah.
That's not a really strong take as fast as I said that. I am still very, very suspect about these guys. And, the first half success they had against Russell Wilson and company felt more due to dysfunction in terms of the vision of what Denver wanted to do that game. And there's still huge problems at the second and middle level and second level here. They got pretty decent play from Isaiah Buggs. And they needed it because in the absence of Alan McNeil, this has been a very, very, lackluster unit in terms of star power. And Brian Branch has had some highlights this year, but he has been inconsistent as a rookie. And, you have a couple of cornerbacks that can be beaten pretty cleanly who are going to be taking the field here for the Lions. That does not bode well for taking on Addison and Jefferson. Justin Jefferson against the Bengals looked pretty fine to me. He certainly didn't have any limitations that I could tell in terms of route tree, in terms of utilization and effectiveness. And Addison is as amazing as always. Like his yak and what he generated and his speed caught the Bengals by surprise a couple times in that game. And Nick Mullins, while like very much not my guy, he got the ball out of his hands a bunch of times when the Bengals were knocking on the door with heavy pressure. And one of those was an unfortunate pick that took points off the board for the Vikings that might have been the difference in the game. But otherwise, like the throwaways and some of the made plays that he had when you know things were busted, they were over. It was a minus play for the Vikings, and he actually turned it into a positive. Like he's kind of a little fearless out there, which is not something I really ever would have associated with Nick Mullins until seeing it against the Bengals with a bet against him. So it was an interesting performance, and with a offensive line that's getting healthier, I don't know how the Lions defense is defending this unit whatsoever. This looks like a problem. The Vikings, I don't want to say it was lucky because no injury is lucky, but they have kind of discovered an absolute commodity in Ty Chandler. Ty Chandler has all of the signs of a guy with a pulse, and he's got fresh legs this time of year, which tends to be a huge difference maker. That was another common theme for week 15, by the way. Like guys who hadn't had a ton of usage on the ground were all of a sudden looked like the fastest players on earth, and made defenses look slow. And I think defenses are starting to feel fatigued right now, and fresh young legs have been a huge factor. Now Lions obviously have fresh young legs as well, and the matchup between the Lions offense and the Vikings defense is probably what decides this one way or the other, more so than Vikings, because I think the Vikings are going to score. You got a pretty narrow distribution there where they're getting 27, 24 points probably. Question is, can you keep the Lions from getting to 30? And that is going to come down to generating pressure. And Brian Flores has done it in spectacularly interesting and fun and different ways all season long. And so I'm inclined to think that he can find more ways to continue to do that. +3 right now is not like the most appealing price point in the world. It's +3 juiced, actually. So you got to lay a little extra if you want the Vikings plus the 3. They're +137 on the money line, total sitting at 47. If this stays as is and no more support comes for the Lions, I'm probably passing on the side and I'm looking at the over here. Presumably with Frank Ragnow back and the Lions offensive line, now at full strength, they're going to be able to generate something on the ground. They're going to be able to give Goff the time he needs to operate, although it is kind of worth pointing out, and this is in the back of my head with every time Jared Goff goes up against a team that likes to play cover 2, that's like the one misfit that really kind of keeps him from being especially successful. The Bears executed it absolutely perfectly 2 times they played Goff, and I would imagine the Vikings have that in up their sleeve as well. So leaning Vikings, haven't made a bet on the game, and ultimately might just play Vikings team total if we don't ever get a better price on either the side or the total.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. The splits for Detroit with Frank Ragnow are insane. They go from being like the best offense in football when he's on the field to almost the worst when he's off and he's back. And I think that made a massive difference against the Broncos. Mullins is fascinating because statistically, he was fine against the Bengals. He was 0.18 EPA per play. That's around what Patrick Mahomes has delivered this year. Now, admittedly, against a very poor Bengals defense. He had a passer rating of effectively 100. His PFF grade wasn't as kind, but it was still 66. Like, that's fine. If they would take that from him the rest of the season, I suspect. But having watched the game and watched every throw that he made, I thought he was, I don't want to say necessarily terrible, but certainly terrible overall because of the high leverage mistakes. But the thing with Mullins is that I think he is terrible in a way that is very conducive to the total going over, because to your point, he gets the ball out quickly. Like, he tries to make all the throws. He whips it down. He makes nice throws. It's just the absolute brain fades that lead to interceptions and turnovers. So he's he's not the type of guy who's just going to go, 3 and out with 2 incomplete passes. Like, he's going to march you down the field 55 yards and then throw a pick 6. So, I mean, they were able to move the ball. I wonder how much of their success offensively was after DJ Reed went out and the Vikings were just able to run the ball at will. And then the Bengals had to overcompensate a little bit for that. And they don't have anyone who can really defend Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson anyway. But the Lions don't either. So I'm not sure that matters as much. So the Lions do have a more serviceable run defense. They have a top 5 unit, although Alan McNeil out hurts that. So I agree with you on the over. I think this will be high scoring. I lean to Mullins being not very good at all, and I would be worried about only getting 3 points with Nick Mullins. Don't you think Josh Dobbs is just better than Nick Mullins? Am I missing something there?
Well, he's got an X factor on the ground that, if he's getting chunk plays with his legs, that could be, the deciding factor here. But I don't know. I've been all over the place on Dobbs. Like some games, some matchups, it's like, wow, this guy absolutely belongs as one of the starters. And then other times it's like, it feels like the game's not going, it's not slowing down for him. The Nick Mullins, and I guess like the one like kind of final thought on this is that like ultimately, if this comes down to offensive line play and you have a hostile environment for the Lions O-line and the Vikings are a little bit better kind of communicating and able to really pick up any kind of pressure, it's possible that Nick Mullins looks even better because Nick Mullins was under duress quite a lot in that game against the Bengals, and the Bengals didn't get home a ton, but they definitely forced him to make some quick decisions and made him just a little bit uncomfortable in the pocket. If he is given like all of the time in the world to operate, and Justin Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson are running amok out there, then this might look like backyard ball for Vikings offense. So, I think given the home field advantage, I would have to say that this is Vikings or pass for me. But ultimately, again, I may just end up on the team total considering current price.
Yep. No, I like it. All right. We are done. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Please rate and subscribe if you're listening to us as a podcast. And the reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.